welcome to the Sit Down. I'm your man, Rod Love, and with me tonight is none other than Doc Polite. Doc, give me some size on the screen, please.
Oh, I got you.
So, Doc, how you doing this evening, man?
I'm good. Right, you like your screen big, don't you?
Man, come on now. Hey, we are missing part of the team tonight, and we hope that she's taking in all that medicine, man, because
Yeah, Sister Wynn.
we didn't want her coming in here making everybody sick.
Yeah, Sister Wynn, we know you listening, and you go ahead and get better.
Get well. You better believe it. But Sister Wynn be working, man, regardless, man. She's always at it. But Doc, and I know Sister Wynn can appreciate this. Man, we're gonna dive into something that we started last week.
Yep. And it's bad that she's not here because it would behoove us to include a woman's perspective about this subject.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, and her being a woman with a son, it's very important to get that perspective. But Doc, come on, man, let's don't have everybody out there waiting to see what we're talking about. What we're talking about this evening is, man, the difference between a father and a daddy.
Yeah.
So Doc, you remember where we left off last week?
Yeah. And this is a touchy subject. Now, I want to frame this, y'all, for the audience before we get into this. This is not specifically a dig at African American community. We addressed it from that perspective because Rod and I are both black men, but this is a universal issue across all demographics. There are fathers and daddies in every group, but we, based on our knowledge, we both are fathers, and we know our experience. So we're speaking from that and what we have dealt with, being also mentors and community activists. We know some of the challenges that are faced in our community, especially when it comes to family. So we're addressing it from that perspective, but by no means are we talking about just black people. That's our disclaimer.
And Doc, let's go ahead and put it out there. This is, hopefully this will be informative. Hopefully this will be educational. But come on, man, this got to be a learning experience, just as it's going to be for me and you.
Yeah, exactly. This is a generational conversation, if you will. This has long been a topic in the black community, because we see the roles of a daddy and a father very different. A daddy, in many terms, is the man that biologically made you. I'm sorry, a father is the person that biologically made you. A daddy is the one that raised you. And see, you don't have to be blood to raise. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, you don't have to be.
And I see where you're going. You don't have to be blood
to be
raise
a daddy to a child. No, you don't. You don't. What you have to have is a profound desire to be impactful and love for that child, and to ensure that they are able to be protected, and we understand what that looks like, and that we're there for them.
All right, Doc. So I'm gonna break it. So Doc, I'm gonna break it down, and we must have that little delay must be taking place tonight. But from the father perspective, Doc. Yeah, but definition: a father is biological or legal male parent. The term is often interchangeable with daddy. But then let's break it down. When you talk about the definition of daddy, daddy is a term that conveys a more intimate, emotional, nurturing relationship between that daddy and his children. So get those definitions out the way, but we want to probe deeper into just the commitment, the relationship aspect of the difference between that father and that daddy. And I think we stumbled upon this last week, Doc, when I prided myself on being the best daddy that I could ever be. And that's how we kind of got into this conversation.
Well, the role of fathers is essential to a child's existence. It's essential to creating that child, but it doesn't automatically encompass the emotional and responsibility aspects of raising a child. And that's why we hear the idiom, anybody can be a father, but it takes a real man to be a daddy. And that's what that's rooted in.
So Doc, you just broke this thing down in terms of the roles.
Right.
And
that's the difference in role.
Yeah. So we wanted to just go to the academic aspect of it. We can talk about the role of a father provides the foundational aspect of parenting, such as the financial support, such as protection and meeting basic responsibilities. But then if you look at the role of a daddy, that role is, the definition of that role is different. A daddy is often seen as someone who is actively engaged in their child's life, providing love, care. And speaking of love and care, I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't give my baby girl a shout out. Happy birthday to Reagan tonight. Man, I don't have no more minors in my house, Doc, but I'm gonna keep going. But that's the love for my daughter. But Doc, you got two different aspects. One aspect, the financial aspect of responsibility, the protection, and then
but see
dad does that too.
That can be kind of precarious as well, because a lot of men think that just giving the money, they can give the money, but they still just they kind of in a gray area, because you need that involvement. You need that emotional aspect of it. A lot of kids would rather have time with their fathers than have money. When your dad shows up, to your game, or comes to a play to support you, or he's involved at your school and he's one of those school dads. Everybody at school know, hey, my dad he's going to support us. Not just me. He's coming here. He's going to be here for the other kids and things like that. And so when you look at it that way, you understand that it's about nurturing. That's the key to being a daddy. That nurturing in all aspects, emotional, physical, financial, everything that it takes to help you get to be a valid and striving adult.
So Doc, let me throw this fastball at you. You're part and engaged in the Central Florida Responsible Fatherhood Initiative. When I think about that, and I mean, fatherhood is a strong word. It's powerful. But how do you go about balancing? Because we're talking about the financial aspect. We're talking about the protective aspect. But then when you look at that dad aspect of it, being a dad ain't just fun and games either. Now,
yeah, it's not. And hold on, you know me with forgetting about my phone, but listen, it's like this. If I step to you and I said, Rod, we're going up tomorrow and we're going to jump out of the airplane, and you've never done that before. I said we're gonna play Army tomorrow. You're gonna get up to me. I've done this, so I'm gonna get up there and you just follow me. Now I'll give you no more instructions. Profoundly, you're gonna fail at that. Why? Because you don't have instructions, and we're forgetting that about the aspect of being a daddy. Many in communities don't learn how to be a daddy because there's not a daddy teaching them how to be a daddy, and so it becomes a vicious cycle. So a lot of people who are just fathers, they don't know where to begin with. They don't know where to begin to become a dad. They're not prepared.
Doc, think about it, and I hear and understand what you're saying, but think about the fact that in order for you to drive a 1-ton or 2-ton vehicle that could actually go out there and unfortunately or accidentally kill somebody, you gotta practice how to drive, to get your learner's permit, to get your operator's permit. But then when it comes to being a parent, let alone a father or a mother, it doesn't come with a handbook.
And you know, the incredible thing is, we think that this is a new phenomenon, but if you look back, in many aspects, this has always been a problem in America. Fatherhood, it always has, and there are numerous cases of children being abandoned on the street and stuff in the 18 and the 1700s, you know, those kind of things. And it's, I'm telling you, it's not a racial thing, and it's not an economic thing. It is a cultural and societal problem that we have not addressed. One of the things most people don't know, that the social service movement as we know it now didn't start until the mid 60s, and that became a standard because many academics begin to realize that children are just not little adults. There's a whole process to children maturing.
But all of this conversation, Doc, takes us back to what I like to call is the beginning. What was the genesis for us to start down this path to having this conversation last week? And I think you would agree with me, Doc. You would agree with me, plus add more with the aspect that if there's one thing that we're lacking from a community perspective, and I'm not blanking in this statement, you know, as it relates to the entirety of the community, but one of the things that we do see that we have a weak spot in right now is parenting. And I'm gonna even go a step further. And
we swung to this topic, Rod. Remember, we swung to this topic because we were talking about mentoring and the lack of the role models and the lack of who is acting as role models. And that's where we kind of swung. You know, a lot of this stuff is going on with kids who don't have that male figure in the home to begin the process of shaping. Don't
have that male figure in the home. And then here's the thing that we agreed upon, man. You don't have to be biological to be right. You know, not only that mentor, but that father figure. And I know it's a play on words. Man, I lean toward that daddy word any day because, Doc, here it is. We're breaking down the definition between father and daddy. And we're talking about being a father, you take on the financial responsibility. You take on the protectionism, if you would. You're that guide, if you would. But then that father's dealing, you know, they're taking on the emotional aspects, the care, the love, the concern. Not to say that a father doesn't love their children, but it's more to it than just giving birth.
And the thing that a lot of people don't understand, that the lack of having a daddy is a lifelong scar. It don't just stop when you turn 18. I've met men who are profoundly wounded and damaged because their father wasn't there. I got, you know, Doc got 1,000 stories. I was a counselor at a treatment facility, and on my first day of doing a holding group, that's when we had all 85 of the residents come in, and I was the new counselor on the block. And the first thing I told them, don't come in my office telling me about your life bad because you ain't have a daddy. And boy, that ticked them off. But what I was trying to do is alert them to the fact that, yeah, okay, you had that happen, but it doesn't need to define you. I don't want to have that conversation. What are you doing now, right now, that you can control?
And Doc, but you know what? You raised an interesting aspect of this from the standpoint, as you were saying that, I'm listening to you very carefully, and you're right on point. We all have fathers. Yeah. But a lot of us didn't have daddy. Yeah. But in growing up in the community that I grew up in, man, I had a lot of you know, you could refer to them as father figures or daddy figures that would say, hey man, don't do that again. I'm gonna come down there. I'm gonna talk to your mama and tell your mama what you do. We had back
Yeah.
then what you would call a village, a community,
Yeah.
and we would engage. But Doc, I gotta come back again full circle, man, and let's talk about the distinction. And for those of you who are tuned in, we're having a conversation this evening, and we're not putting one in competition with the other, but we are. We're making a distinction between being a father and being a dad.
Mm-hmm.
And, somebody got to say it. Any of us can be a father.
Well, one of the
Point
things
blank.
I find out, Rod, is a lot of people don't want to drink the Kool-Aid and they need to. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you don't have to stay stuck where you are. There's nothing that says you can't wake up tomorrow and change your life entirely if you are committed to that change. Because you were raised without a dad does not mean that you can't go and decide to be the best dad. I never had a dad.
But Doc, but on that point, there's a lot of conversations that are not being had that should be had.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But I see people not wanting to do the work, Rod.
Is it not wanting to do the work? Is it not wanting to do the work, Doc? Or is it not wanting to offend somebody?
Because see, it's like this. You know what the biggest reason that people fail at counseling, or they drop out of counseling?
What is that?
Because they hit a wall where they actually no longer have a way to deflect what the problems are, and they have to take responsibility and do work. That's the point that most people want to drop out of counseling, because now they're aware of it and they know they need to make a decision about changing. And that's scary.
Yeah. Doc, I think having these types of conversations, hopefully, man, we can encourage more men, period. More men to kind of sit back and sit down, if you would, if you to play on words with the sit down, but but to sit back and really assess whether or not they're being their best self. Again, we can all be fathers, Doc, but I want to be the best dad that I can be, and that means putting in more work.
And that also means being cognizant of the time you have. See, a lot of people think they got time. I got time, I'm gonna change, and the best time and the only time you have is right now, deciding what you want to be. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, those fathers can make a choice to become a dad. They can begin the process, and take responsibility. The hardest thing for it is taking that responsibility to say, yeah, I failed at this. And being open with your children. Say, yeah, I could have done better. Or I should have been there.
Doc, you're hitting it right on the head. But you know what, man? I tell you, I would love to get some of those other perspectives. And for those of you who are watching us on the Let's Talk Nation Facebook page, I just like to get some of that feedback about what do you believe. And man, I tell you, I hate to say it like this, because no matter which way you say it, it almost devalues one of the two. But what is of more value to you, being a father or being a dad?
Well, you're talking about, let's reframe that, the emotional role. Mm-hmm. When it comes to being a father versus being a dad, I think it's defined more in an emotional role of a man being present and engaged, where that child can come to them, can rely on them for sage advice and wisdom and guidance that's built on their love for their child. They want to see them. You want your child to see you being productive. You want them to see you being resilient. want them to see you being a balanced man, a fair man, all of the positive attributes that make a man great. You want
But
to
don't
see
you?
your
But
children.
don't you have to put in the work, Doc,
Yes, it's work.
to earn the trust first and foremost?
Well, when you consistently are delivering to your kids the same thing, like you, okay, your girls, as crazy as you act sometimes, the girls love you. Why? Because you have consistently shown your commitment to love, provision, protection, and emotional understanding. You understand?
Nah, cause see, my
And
daughters might
see,
take that and say
no, no,
they've gotten
no.
used to the craziness.
I told you. Remember, we had a conversation. It was last year, about the middle of last year, and I said, "Rod, you don't have to worry because your girls more than likely will never go out there and get a bum. Why? Because you set a role model. You set a framework and a mold that boy, that young man has got to meet, because they're not going to tolerate that, because they're going to see the difference in how he acts versus how daddy would act.
See, Doc, what I'll do is I'll defer because my father-in-law, he's the pastor, and I know you know the word too like none other. But man, what I lean on is the fact that what is that verse that talk about you raise a child up
In the way you should go, and he will not depart from it.
Hey, and so that's what
and
I'm
exactly.
banking on.
And also, the Bible tells us, don't bring your children to wrath. Don't provoke them to wrath.
Man,
you know why? And some parents do, because they cuss at their kids. They do all kind of stuff. We automatically think, when we say parents, we think of these loving people who cook us dinner, wash our clothes, give us roof, and all of this thing. But it's a lot of mammies and fathers out there, a lot of them. And these are people who shouldn't have kids. Have you ever met someone you absolutely say to yourself, this person shouldn't have never had kids? They have no business with children.
You know what I do say, Doc? Here's what I do say. I do say that I've witnessed and I've, just kind of been in the forefront, if you would, of watching the way these mothers have transcended being that mama, if you would. Mm-hmm. Being in my household, my kids, they just call their mama Ma. But I see that more than I see men who are fathers that transcend into becoming daddies. When you and I, we prepared for this show and we did some analysis, man. We went and we just did some work with just making sure that we were engaged in this discussion. But when I look at the term daddy, transcends biology, often applied to someone who fulfills that emotional and nurturing. But then when I look at the father, who's defined as the male biological contributor, listen to that word, Doc, contributor to the child's existence and genetics. Mm-hmm. I don't hear the love, the care, the understanding, and even me with my daughters, I got to be the heavy too.
And a lot of women are actually put into the role of having to be mama, by just single parent mama, and it's unfair. Now,
but that's why we have a lot of these other organizations. I mean, and I hate to say organizations substituting being a parent, fatherhood, or being the daddy to a lot of young people out there. And I saw Bishop Stubbs online with us, man. He has an organization called Standing Tall, I think it is, Doc. Mm-hmm. And you see these organizations that are out there filling the gap as it relates to being the daddy to some of these young men and wayward boys that they need that attention. They need that mentorship, but they need that engagement. I mean, anybody, and I hate to say it because we pit one against the other, but anybody can
Well,
be a father.
I always encourage mentorship. The only complaint I would have about mentorship, as I see it, is we're not intervening early enough. We are catching kids after um, they get into trouble most times, or they've been out in the street. That I told you that's why I can't stand that whole credible messenger crap. And yeah, I said that, and that ain't on Rod. That's on me. Because what it's saying is mess up, we'll make you a spokesperson, and then you can teach kids how to mess up. But what you're doing is reaffirming that you'll get you'll get yourself together after you have had a run in that has done damage to you.
And Doc, I will say this, and I'm gonna weigh in on that. Um, I think there's a place in the space for everybody to engage because, yeah, on one end of the spectrum, you do have some young people that somebody who has been there, who's experienced that dialogue and conversation may take that young person, or you don't even have to be young, you got old fools too, Doc, but that could actually be helpful. But the other side of it that I also want to defend is those individuals that are out there and they've been putting in this work forever that haven't been impacted and affected. We got to give them as much weight as being mentors and credible as well.
But here's the issue with that. And most of the data says it doesn't work. This is why they won't hire them to work at youth facilities. You can't have a drug conviction. You can't have a criminal record. Why? Because
and I hear you on that, Doc. It makes sense from a policy standpoint, but you do have individuals that have a background of having substance abuse or having a run-in with the system.
I have no problem with them going out there on their own dime, but to turn it into a funded program, I think it's counterproductive. Because now it becomes a reward system in a certain way. You messed up. We're going to give you some money now because you could teach those kids not to mess up.
I hear you, Doc, and I want to get us back full circle. But I will say, Doc, all in all, I had the pleasure and opportunity to be part of something that I pray and hope grows and evolve. It's called Iron Sharpens Iron.
Okay.
Was invited yesterday, man, and probably about 15 or 20 men. We got together, man, and we were engaging each other, man. It was a safe place for us to have our own conversation. But everybody in that circle, were impacted by something. We had individuals that have past histories that made mistakes, and we got some folk that really impressed me sitting around that circle to talk about how just some dialogue, faith, and conversation with other folk helped them change and turn their lives around. So I'm not going to discount it, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And we still need to address the fact that we as men are not engaged at the level that we need to. I watch Black women, and I pay attention to how they coalesce around each other. They organize. They are focused on growth, and there's no reason that Black men can't do that either, other than in many respects ego.
Doc,
that ego.
You're so right, but you know what? Here's the irony of what you just said. When we have a crisis in the community, and this is not just an observation, when we have a crisis in the community, we see, and I'm not just going to say Black women, we see women running to the forefront to address the crisis. If there's a drive-by shooting, if there's something that's taking place, we're supposed to be those protectors. And you know what? I hear people talking about live and live, and you know, women can stand to yeah, they can stand to the forefront just as we can. But man, I see women are really our armor guards, man, running to the forefront, and you're looking around and you're saying, where are the brothers? Where are the men that are the
again, how can you be what you haven't been raised to be? How, I mean, when you talk to these young men now, I'd say many men under 35, young men, a lot of them lack emotional maturity, emotional IQ. And what I mean by that is how to deal with conflict, how to self-soothe, okay, and how to critically think a problem that they face. A lot of them lash out. And where does that come from? Because they were raised in a household, more than likely, where emotion was the primary issue that was modeled. The behavior that was modeled was primarily emotional outbursts or get emotional about a situation than to sit back and think about it.
So Doc, here's the question to you. And I get where you're going, and I can appreciate it.
Yeah.
So since we're going through this process and identifying the weak areas, if you would, how do we impact that? I mean, what do we need to do to impact? Yeah, we know we do have faith-based organizations that we would think and know that are contributing to helping building men, if you would. What other aspects? What other conduits that are out there?
Okay, it can be some, but let me tell you why we want this. We want to. There's a long-term social benefit of having dads versus fathers. Okay, and I just touched on one of them: emotional resilience. When the child, all children, boys and girls, when they see their father being consistent and patient and problem solving, using that logic versus, mom's tendency to be emotional. And y'all don't come at me about being sexist. There are profound differences in men and women. That's why we have men and women. Okay, men often lack the emotional makeup that a woman has. I would not want my wife to be as hard as I am. And I want her to be soft and yeah.
Doc, if you would, man, because you said something and you just skirted past it. Can you make the statement again about the value of the long-term impact of having the value of more dads out there than fathers?
Well, again, it engage with your children. It's a role model. You're showing them how to handle the emotional aspect in a different manner. Okay, when your children see you solving problems versus screaming or whatever, or getting excited, and you like me, in case in point, me and my wife have a very different view of almost everything we encounter. She'll see something as a crisis and I see it as a problem. And that's one of the things that I've always stressed to her. In our marriage, in our relationship, we have problems that are solved by both of us participating in the solution. Okay, we don't go there and I don't accuse her, she doesn't accuse me. We look at it and say, okay, why did this happen, and what outcome do we want? And it's mature. That's what adults do. You talk about what the problem is. I don't get sick. In the years you've known me, you never see me blow up. You never see me blow up. Okay, why? Because I know that anything I encounter is a problem to be solved. It doesn't mean I have to cuss and carry on. And
but Doc, in all due respect to what you just said, the reason why, from my perspective of knowing you and knowing why I've never seen you blow up before, is because, Doc, you actually have a level of emotional intelligence that that's something that you have to work on. That's something that you
Yeah.
learn. That's something that you grow yourself with. So that's why I never
Well,
saw you
well,
blow up.
but I wasn't always like that. And I'm telling you, because I grew up in that same environment that I'm talking about. I'm not saying this from not having the experience. My mom used to, everything was a blow up. You know, and she'd get frantic about stuff. And I didn't want to be that way as a boy, as a young boy. And they couldn't understand why I was so like, I don't want to get, you know, but she grew up in another era. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my mom grew up where black people had to sit in the back of the bus and everything was segregated. So her experience, her emotional experience, I understand that, but that didn't mean that I had to see everything as an affront or a slight. In Minnie's perspective, she did. She saw things as slights and stuff, but that was based on her upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
hey, Doc, go ahead, finish your thought on that. I'm sorry.
And so that's why it's critical to have that balance. Dads give that balance, okay? Because most men are gonna default to logic when they're raised men. Men we like logic. We like things in order. We want to see
sense. That makes sense too.
Yeah. We don't want to do stuff and we're expending extra energy we know we don't have to expend.
You're right. Hey, Doc, but you know, because we're down to the last 10 minutes of this show, as we've been talking, I'm going through an evolution now.
Okay.
and I'm serious. And that's why, Doc, I can appreciate you navigating with me, man, because, you know, we can grow on this topic, but I've evolved, and I'm going to tell you how I've evolved on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
I started out by basically almost pitting fatherhood against being a dad.
Mm-hmm.
I've evolved to the point that, Doc, what we need to make sure that we do is not pit one against the other, but
right.
Everything should be a growth. And I believe now, through this conversation, Doc, that fatherhood is the beginning. You can't, you know, you can't be a dad without
being a
the fatherhood piece.
Yeah.
But then from that, Doc, there should be an evolution that takes place with a father that morphs them into becoming a dad.
Now, a curious thing that we're on that. Now, I see more young men 30 and under who are actually doing that. You know, they that's the benefit too of some of the emotional aspect. It's not all negative. That these young men are there for their kids. They want to be there for their kids and stuff. But we got the phenomena of toxic baby mamas now, which we didn't have generations ago.
You know, Doc, we talked about the intersection, if you would, of a father and a dad, and that intersection also embraces community. And so some of the research that you and I did, when we look at the intersection of fatherhood and being a dad as it relates to the community, places a strong emphasis on kinship and collective responsibility. Being a dad often extends beyond one's biologics, if you would.
Yeah.
But then it dives into values, morals.
Well, let me touch on the key benefits of being a dad. I'm just jump over them. Number one, emotional resilience in children. We talked about that just then. Educational achievement. Kids who have that dad in the house are more likely to remain in school and pursue higher education as a path. Reduce risky behavior, more accountability. That dad can provide that level of supervision that may be lacking. I'm not saying that moms are not disciplinarians, because mine certainly was, but there is a tried and true understanding that the voice of a man can change the whole atmosphere in the room.
Well, yeah, the tone.
Yeah, that tone, you know. So we have to understand that. And another thing is it breaks the cycle of poverty because that child can see that dad's work, they provide, they see that a child is more likely to emulate that and do better than his parents. you know that's one of the things I love watching my son, and my kids. They're doing better at their age than I was at that age, and they're a lot further along financially and family wise than I was at their ages.
And a lot of us,
And
Doc, are first generation of education, if you would, first
yeah,
generation of experiencing some degree of wealth. But Doc, I guess as we continue to roll all of this up, bringing this thing in for a landing, man, empowering men to be dads. How do we get there? And from my perspective, I'm gonna lay this out and I'm gonna pass it back to you, Doc. But we got to understand all the dynamics that we talked about thus far. And
well, first
go
of all,
ahead.
we gotta change our narrative around fathers, because confronting men about being fathers versus being dad is counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
They many times they are unemployed or they lack resources. It's many obstacles that they're encountering themselves that don't lend them to be the dads that they want. Don't think every
If you
man that
if you base it on the definitions that we have gotten here and we talked about
Mhm.
tonight and that
Yeah,
we've gone to Webster, if you
yeah,
base it on that, you would have men that would sit back and say, okay, want me to be a good father? I'll pay my child support and I'll have my discussions with my child about
right,
protectionism and
yeah,
move on. But no,
yeah,
it's wider and it ranges
yeah.
far wider than that.
Because dads are important. We want to see every father become a dad. Because why? Because the better off our community is, better off. It becomes safer because all of us are contributing. Okay, there's more of a connectedness when that dad is in the house. You could go to a lot of neighborhoods, and the house where the father's there and the mother's there, a lot of the kids in the neighborhood, they hang out there.
Mm-hmm.
I know that certainly was my kid's case.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When I was in the house, that's a whole different show. But and that's one of the positive things. That's what got me into mentoring and stuff, is the fact that I had a young black man, my son, who I love so much. I didn't want him to become a statistic. I did not want the other little boys growing up around him killing him. So, I would reach out to him. We used to live in a cul-de-sac, and all the kids would come over there, and play at our house. Well, at my house, and that was cool. Why? Because I was engaging. I love kids, and I always engage them in positive ways. And so you have to understand that while you may be a father, you can always transition to being a dad. It's never too late. Step up to the plate. Don't listen to the noise. You're gonna have a detractor. Man, anything you do in life, you're gonna have detractors. It's gonna always be somebody trying to discourage you, interfere, and all of that. Man, we would not be where we are today if we subscribe to all the naysayers me and you have ran into.
You're absolutely right, Doc. And I got to say this. There's the old saying, and you can put it in perspective of, it's not how you act or respond when people are watching you.
Mm-hmm.
It's the character that you maintain.
Right. That's what character is. Character is what you do when nobody's watching you.
Correct.
How do you perform?
And on this topic, Doc, unbeknownst to me, my daughter, boy, I love them both, but my baby turned 18 today.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't realize, man, through raising my kids, that as some of their friends and neighborhood kids have grown up, they've turned around and said, hey, Mr. Love, man, growing up, I got to tell you, you basically had that aspect of being daddy love. And I never realized, because you treat those children with care and loving, while we just didn't let our kids go hang out with everybody and anybody.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure that those kids at a young age were setting their sights on shooting for the stars. And those kids that grew up around a man, you just don't realize that while you're being a daddy to your kids and teaching them, other kids are watching that as well, and they're embracing it. And now they're grown and they're saying, "Man,
And
I
it's
really
gonna
appreciate and respect that."
it's gonna get even more profound for you when they are older and they have their kids. My daughter, she surprised me. My middle daughter surprised me, and she said she was telling her husband, our parents gave us standards. We had to perform and do things in the house, and we just couldn't make up excuses. They had an expectation on from the time I was born, and I can remember we were always taught that we were going to college and that we were going to be successful. She said they told us that all the time, and we did.
You ingrained that in them.
Yes. Because why? Because we know it getting it here. Okay, planting that seed will blossom.
And it's easier for young people to grasp success when that's all they're being told about how successful they're going to be, versus you continue to get out in this real world and that competition hits you. And you have, like you said, Doc, earlier, you're going to have your naysayers, you're going to have your haters. I wish I'd invested in Haterade a long time ago. I wouldn't even be working today. But Doc, we about to tune off, man, but I appreciate this conversation tonight, brother.
All righty.
Hey, for those of you who tuned in to the sit down, hey, we're here every Monday from 6 to 6:45. Tune in, and we'd love to have you on the show as a guest every Monday from 6 to 6:45. My co-host, Doc Polite, and also Sister Shaquita Wynn. We love to see you. We'll see you next week on the sit down.